Okay, after looking at your work from yesterday, overall, you guys did a remarkable job. I was really pleased. One thing I want to remind you of is to make sure that you're being very careful with your notional space and your envelope. Those are the things that pretty much make or break the overall look of the drawing. So I'm just actually starting my notional space box here by drawing across from the bottom, and I've made sure to line up the edge of my ruler with the edge of my board so that I know that I'm making a straight line across. And I'm going to do the same thing with the top, and this kind of it ends up being sort of a shortcut for this type of work when you're working site size or the exact same size. If you're going bigger or smaller, it doesn't work quite as well. I'm going to use this edge here as the edge of my notional space box here. I guess I'll go in just a little bit. The orange just comes in just a tiny bit. It cropped very closely to my image. So remember to keep these lines straight. You want them to be plumb. You don't want them to be at an angle. And remember to have them touching the outside edge of your objects. So the outside edges in these cases are the edge of the banana, the top of the picture here, the edge of the orange, and the bottom of the orange. My measurements for my notional space box. It's not exactly 100% today. 7 3/4, a little bit more. This is a larger one. And to make that line straight, I take that same measurement and I move it up. And then that should give me a straight line when I bring up my ruler onto the edge of it. So there's notional space. Now for the envelope. The envelope is going to go from the edge, the outermost edges also, but making diagonals or smaller shapes. Now, there's a couple ways you can do an envelope. You can make it wider, like this, where you would have it coming out like this, and then you'd have another one here, and then you'd have this flat space here. Or you can go up to this top edge here, which would effectively cut off the edge of the handle here. So, but that's not the way I generally prefer to go. I guess I'd rather just make them wider. Then I can run other guidelines if I need to. Remember, all these lines you're going to want to go very light with. I'm not. I want them to be a little bit more dark so you can see them. Now in this case, I am going to actually cut off part of this because I want to hit this over here. So I can either go from the edge of the orange here up to the tip of the picture here, but I feel like that cuts off too much, so I'm actually going to just aim for the tip of the spout right here. So I'm going from the edge of the orange to the edge of the spout to create that. And then down on this side, there's really not much that you need to cut off. Mostly just this, going from the bottom of this edge of that orange past the bananas here. So now the points that I'm going to transfer are, I'm going to actually mark them with a marker so you can see them a little better. where the envelope intersects with notional space. And I'm just going to go ahead and take measurements in order to get those, and then I will connect those with lines. And I can take measurements a couple of different ways. Since my notional space box is the exact size as my notional space box here, I can simply measure from the corners or the edges. That's just being a placeholder right there. Or I can use a ruler if I want to be very exact. But the rulers can be difficult at the same time. In some ways they're more helpful, in other ways less. Generally I just mark on my ruler for that point that I'm looking for. So the beginning of this one, and I didn't bother really with this because this is such a small space. Sometimes it's worthwhile to take two measurements, to measure it with your pencil for the first go, and then with your ruler. And then that's pretty good, that's right there. So that's this one right here, that's that line. So I'm going to go ahead and put that down. All right, I'm going to speed things up for the rest since this is pretty much our third, we've been through notional space here and the envelope a couple of times. Now for this one I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to add in two more guidelines to it. I'm going to essentially drop a plumb line down the middle of here, or as close to the middle as I can. I actually might just drop it here since that is one exact point along, and that then I can use that to continue to help me with my guidelines. So that's it. 3 3/4. So each of these, all of the things that I do along here are just to help me keep things sort of in order, so that I don't get too lost as I'm trying to create these. It's easy to get kind of lost while you're doing this and make something too large and something too small, or put it in sort of the wrong spot. So then this just becomes another set of coordinates that I can work from to make my measurements from. And this is what I'm going to go just at 4 from the top. I'm going to drop it at 4 inches from the top. If you were working from life, you can actually drop a plumb line from the edge of your easel that creates that. But so really all I've done is I've created sort of a grid that then I can make decisions on, as well as my envelope. So it's just another tool. I have more things to look at. I have more ways of judging distances. So now I can see, what's in this coordinate here and what is over here, and how they connect to each other. And then from here on out, we're just sort of following the exact same thing that we did before, finding main areas and beginning to map them out. So I'm actually going to start down here with the edge here where the banana hits. That should be slightly above this point. And if it's not, that means my point is wrong and I need to double check it. See, I think I need to bring this down. That's slightly off. As you're doing this, when you run across things that are out of whack, you just go right ahead and fix them. Don't just say, oh well, that's okay. Make the changes. And so this kind of comes down at an angle, catching the edge. So I've made my first line here. Now it falls along the notional space box here to about here before it begins to curve in. And I'm just going to map out this curve to begin with. And what I'm doing is I'm paying close attention to not just the shape of the curve, but the negative space in between the edge of the curve and the notional space box here and the envelope line here. And I'm actually going to map this point here where the bananas intersect, so I know where I'm stopping for my curve. And that's, double check that. There we go. So this comes almost to the edge of here, and it stops about right here. It comes really very close to the edge of the envelope. And then I'm going to double check this curve. It seems to come up a little bit more, comes in. And then this part intersects notional, or the envelope line slightly before there, before that intersection here. And so that comes up. And then let's find out where this point is in space. Let's graph that. The edge of this banana here. I think that was good. And the top. Let's find the top as well. It's a little lower than my first estimate. Now I'm going to place my pencil on the angle that is, and I'm going to double check it that way. Bring it up just slightly. So we have lots of tools at our disposal. We look at the comparisons of where things start and end. We look at the angles that they are in. We pay attention to the guidelines and the negative space and how things develop. So now I'm going to track the edge of the curve here of this banana. So I'm going to find where this contour line intersects with that guideline that I created, the plumb line in the center. Intersecting points, finding intersecting points is really key to creating the shape. I'm going to find this intersecting point here, so I can see where the top contour line of that one ends. I'm going to double check that. That seems a little off. Nope, that's a little high. And then this actually, from looking at it, it's sloping down from here before it starts to come up by the edge there. So pay close attention to all of the nuances as you're developing it. So then I can see this shadow shape here, that it kind of comes forward past that line before going up. So now I'm going to map out these where the stems of the banana connect. Remember, you can make lines before you take measurements. You just want to double check them after you've made the lines. So actually, I can measure from this side. Measuring is kind of awkward, especially when you're trying to keep your hand out of the way of the camera. And it also helps to make measurements from multiple spots. So it's actually going to need to go up even further. I know if I look at this that it comes in slightly before it intersects, and then I can just connect the dots. Connecting dots is actually, like doing like a connect the dots exercise is actually quite useful for this type of work. You can also run your measurements across, the same as you did with your notional space while you're working site size, like this. As long as you make sure that your ruler stays sure that you're not going out past it. Now, the easiest way to do this to keep things tidy is to use a T-square, actually. So then you can pretty much be guaranteed to get those right, those accurate lines. Right now I'm relying on both my eye and just the feel of the ruler at this point, which works okay, but only because I've been doing this for a long time. But if you practice it now, then you start developing that eye, which is what I want for you guys. Looks like this actually comes down slightly underneath that envelope line. Now I'm looking at this and this feeling slightly off to me, so I'm going to double check some measurements just to see where I'm at. Curves in perspective can be notoriously tricky to work with because you want to get sort of the bend in the road, as it were, into the right spots. And the other thing to do is just to check it against itself rather than against the guidelines. Just go, is that wider or narrower? Not as much wider, actually, which is funny because I just narrowed it. the top of the orange there. I do kind of random checks on curves to make sure that I'm not making them too sharp or too loose, so I can go up against the notional space or against the envelope and just go across and double check them.